Most people pray to get God's favor, but how many people do you know who actually pray to remain in God's favor? How many people do you know who actually thinks about the fact that you can lose God's favor, where you can start out having it, but then it's taken away from you? If this is a topic that you've ever wondered about, then don't worry because we're going to get into it in this episode. In last week's episode, we talked about how it's wrong to expect God to have favorites, and what you really should be seeking is favor from God. And I know that leads some people to the question of what does it take to actually receive favor from God? And so I was digging into this and I found myself reading the story of Solomon. Solomon was a great man, and he started off very wise, very strong, and having a lot of favor with God. But by the time that I got to the end of his story, Solomon lost everything. Solomon lost all of the favor that he received. And I found that very interesting. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the moment where Solomon lost his favor so that we can learn not only what it takes to receive favor, but also what it takes to maintain it. And so if you want to follow along with me, go to 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 6. It says, "Now King Solomon loved many foreign women. Besides Pharaoh's daughter, he married women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and among the Hittites. The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, 'You must not marry them, because they will turn your hearts to their gods.' Yet Solomon insisted on loving them anyway. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. And in fact, they did turn his heart away from the Lord. In Solomon's old age, they turned his heart to worship other gods instead of being completely faithful to the Lord his God, as his father David had been. Solomon worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. In this way, Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to follow the Lord completely as his father David had done." So let's stop right there. Reading this passage was very interesting to me because it literally gives us the blueprint of what it takes to not only receive favor from God, but also remain in favor with God. So if you look at verses 4 through 5, it tells us that Solomon turned away and he began to worship other gods. And then verse 6 tells us that by him doing this, he did what was evil in the Lord's sight because he refused to follow God completely. And the word that stood out to me was completely. Because God is telling us, in order for you to have favor, in order for him to be with you, you have to follow him completely. And some of us like to half follow God, where we don't fully turn away from him, but we're not fully following him either. Some of us have a tendency of making things gods in our life. And so it's like we don't fully surrender to God. We don't fully follow his instructions, and we don't fully obey him. We give half of our efforts to God, and then we give the other half of our efforts to other things that we make gods in our life. And I know that this sounds crazy because a lot of us look at this and we say things like, well, I don't have statues in my house, and I don't worship other things, and I don't follow other religions, and I don't have Buddha, and I don't have this, and I don't have that. So how can anything be a God in my life? I'm following God completely because I only believe in God. But if you look at what the definition of God is, like what does God mean? God means creator. It means ruler of all things, and it represents power and authority. God means to be a ruler and to have power and authority. And some of you have been giving things power and authority in your life. You have been allowing things to rule your life. You have been allowing things to dictate your life. You have been allowing things to create a life that you don't want to live. And when you do that, you are making something a God in your life. So when God says, "Follow me completely," you are not following him completely because you are giving half of your efforts to what he said and half of your efforts to the things that you are making a God in your life. So let's break this down because I don't like to just tell you things. I like to actually help you walk through it. So how do you give things power and authority? You give it power and authority when you make the decision to entertain it. Authority means reliance and trust. And power means force, meaning great strength. So when something comes in your life and you choose to entertain it, the more that you entertain that thing, the more trust you're going to have in it. And the more that you trust in that thing, the more power you are igniting for it to operate in your life. Have you ever heard anyone say the phrase, "You will see what you believe"? The reason why people say this is because our beliefs have the capacity to produce the things that we are trusting in. That is why it's so hard for people to produce things that they do not believe. And it's so easy for you to see whatever it is that you trust in your heart, even if it's negative. That's why you don't see a lot of people who say things like, "I can't do something," achieve that thing. Your trust builds strength for whatever you are trusting in to produce something in your life. And if you're wondering how, think of it like this. Your trust is going to trigger an action. So if you're the type of person, like let's say you want to start a business and you tell yourself, "I can't do that." In your heart, you believe, "I am not capable of starting a business. A person like me can't do that." Then your trust is going to produce the action of procrastination. Your trust is going to produce the action of self-sabotage. Your trust is going to produce actions that keep you unsuccessful. Your trust triggers an action, which gives power to the thing that you're trusting in to produce in your life. So let's drive this home because I'm rambling. Solomon was favored by God, and he lost everything because he refused to obey God completely. And if you look up verse 6 in other translations like I did, some of them say he did not follow God fully, which means that he was creating space for other things in his life. I didn't read it, but if you look at verse 7, it says that he was building shrines for these gods. Not only was he, believing in these gods or trusting in these gods, but he was building up altars for these gods. He was creating space for something outside of God to be a God in his life. And although we don't realize it, we do the same thing. Because a God in your life does not have to be a statue. It does not have to be you following another religion. The moment that you give into your fear more than you trust God on what he told you, you are making your fear a God in your life. The moment that you entertain the negative thoughts in your head that is telling you that you cannot do something that God promised you that he was going to do for you, you are making your thoughts a God in your life. The moment that you idolize things where you only seek God for material things, you only seek him for the car, for the money, for the house, for the career, for the marriage, for the children, you are making those things a God in your life. Anything that you are entertaining that is stopping you from following God fully is a God in your life. Favor comes when you follow God completely without distractions and without excuses. So if you want to get favor from God and remain in favor with God, then you have to surrender anything that you have been given power and authority over your life. Stop allowing fear to rule your life, where it's stopping you from doing the things that God told you to do because you're so paralyzed and you think you can't do it and you think you don't have what it takes. Stop allowing people pleasing and what your family might say and what your environment might say and what your old classmates might say stop you from doing the things that God told you to do because you're too embarrassed to hear their opinion of what they're going to say about it. Stop allowing things to have power over you and to rule your life and to create an outcome that you have been praying against. Surrender the things that you have been making a God in your life and surrender the influences that have been influencing you to do so. Because if we go back to the story of Solomon, if you remember, Solomon didn't just randomly start following these gods. Solomon got into connection with women that God told him not to get into connection with because he knew that this would be the outcome. These women were influencing Solomon to do things that dishonored God. And the same thing applies to us in our life. Some of us are afraid because of the people that are around us and the things that they have been saying to us. Some of us are people pleasers, and we have people who don't understand the path that God has taken us on, and they want us on a different path. And so we've been trying to please them and satisfy them and go their route, even though we know in our heart that's not what we want to do. We have to surrender the people who are influencing us to create other gods and create altars in our life. And don't be upset with them, because I'm not saying, cuss them out or anything, because a lot of these people, they're not doing it on purpose. For these women that Solomon was, shacking up with, these gods were their norms. They weren't intentionally trying to, persuade him into a wrong direction. And a lot of people in your life is not intentionally trying to persuade you. It's just that God did not open their eyes to see the vision that he has on your life. They can't see why you're trying to do something out the norm. They can't see why you're trying to be different. They can't see why you're trying to do something they don't understand. They can't see why you're trying to do something they don't have the capacity to do. They're not intentionally trying to influence you, but although it's not intentional, it's still wrong. And so you have to surrender these people as well. You don't have to beef with them. You don't have to cuss them out. You don't have to be hurt, because like I said, a lot of them are not doing it on purpose, but you have to go against them. The same way that God told Solomon, steer away from these women because they are going to lead you down a dark path. God is saying to you in this season, steer away from these people. I know you love them. It's your mama. It's your grandma. It's your father. It's your brother. It's your cousin. It's your best friend since kindergarten. But you have to steer away from these people, because if you continue to listen to them, you are not going to experience the favor that I'm trying to give you. But I have talked way too much, okay? The main point that I want you to take away is that favor does not come from being perfect. Favor does not come from being a favorite of God's. Favor comes from your surrender and your decision to fully trust God. And so that is all that I have for you today. I'm sorry if I talk too much. I'm trying to get better with my rambling, but before we go, I do have a weekly action step that I would love to give you. So sometime this week, I want you to identify anything that you have been making a God in your life. I want you to ask yourself, what is it that you are trusting in more than you are trusting in God? Is it your fear? Is it your doubts? Is it a person? Is it a material thing? Is it your own plan? Is it yourself? What are you trusting in more than you are trusting in God? I also want you to check what you are entertaining. Ask yourself, what am I feeding my mind daily? What are some things that I am giving my efforts to that doesn't align with God? And then the last thing that I want you to do is I want you to practice fully obeying God. I want you to think about one thing that God told you to do that you are capable of doing now. And I want you to fully do it without distractions, without excuses, without entertaining the doubts and the fears that may come into your mind, without entertaining the people who may have something negative to say about it. If God told you to start that podcast, create the first episode this week. If God told you to write that book, write the first chapter this week. If God told you that you're going to be a wife, go to the marriage seminar this week. I want you to do it without a care in the world and just fully obey the instruction that he gave you. But that is all that I have for you today. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe so that you get a notification the next time an episode is released. Also, leave a review and let me and others know how you enjoyed the show. And if you want to stay connected, follow me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Prospering with Christ. But that's all I have for you today, and I will see you next week.